Well, good afternoon and welcome, everyone. We're back with another episode of the Equity and Energy podcast, and we're super excited today. We have Ms. Jasmine Brown-DeRousselle, Chief External Affairs Officer over at GNO Inc. And we're just super excited to welcome you, Jasmine. How you doing?
Excellent. How are you? I'm really excited to be with OHUB, one of our beloved partners. Obviously, Leroy is one of our favorite people. And so we're excited to be here. Thank you for having us.
It's cool, man. I think probably one of the biggest things now is having that that native New Orleans feel for this project and everything. We wanted to just kind of get you on board and kind of give folks a little background on what's going on, how this partnership came about, and some of the things that you see in policy and that are happening at the state level that's going to be advantageous for our community.
Absolutely. I'm excited to dig in.
All right, cool. Well, I'll tell you what, let's start out first by tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay. That's an easy one. I feel like we're starting with the easy questions and then we're going to progress.
Then it gets harder, yeah.
But this is great. First of all, before I tell you anything about myself, I just want to formally thank the OHUB family, obviously Rodney and Shanteria at the top, but then also Leroy, you and Nikki and the whole team. You guys have been phenomenal. And I say that with every fiber in me. And I want to make sure that as I'm saying that you're interpreting that with all caps.
Oh yeah, man.
You have been fantastic partners, really delivering great results, impactful results, doing exactly what the intended purpose for your arrival in this region was, and exceeding the expectations. So thank you for that work, and of course, thank you for having me. But a little bit about me. I'm Jasmine Brown-DeRousselle. I serve as the Chief External Affairs Officer at GNO Inc. GNO Inc. is the economic development organization for the 10 parishes of Greater New Orleans. And so, of course, that includes Orleans Parish, New Orleans, right? But then it also includes surrounding parishes like Jefferson Parish, St. Bernard Parish, the North Shore, River Region, and a few other surrounding parishes within our footprint. And so, obviously, as we start thinking about economic development in the traditional sense, it means to attract net new cash flows. And so our CEO, however, has taken a bit of a holistic approach to that traditional kind of definition of economic development, really understanding and taking a page out of Charlotte's book to say, hey, if we have the conditions here, if we have the business environment here that will allow for businesses to quite naturally want to be here without the forcing function of anything else, then we will have an economy where both businesses and people can thrive. And so that's the approach that we take here at GNO Inc. And that's really the side of the house that I live on and respectfully lead, and that's the business environment side. So I'm leading all of our policy efforts at the federal level, at the state level, and then even sometimes at the local level when applicable and when needed. And so, in addition to that, I am kind of leading all of our external affairs work and doing some internal work here within the house as well. But born and raised here in the great city of New Orleans, specifically, and this is going to draw a little controversy, Leroy. So I'm just going to tell you this up front. Specifically, I am from the West Bank. So some will argue that is not New Orleans, but the way my address reads in Eldridge, Louisiana, and always has read, is that it is New Orleans. And so I'm a proud West Banker, a proud product of Algiers. My family is from Marrero.
Yeah.
I have been to a number of schools. Really, I don't know why I wasn't a bad child, but for whatever reason, God had it that I hopped around a little bit, and I believe for the better. But the high school that I went to, which is really the most important question right here in New Orleans, is the best high school, I would say, and I think others would agree. And that high school is the Xavier Prep. The Xavier Prep is what really how that should have kind of rolled off.
The Xavier Prep, yes.
The Xavier Prep. If you know, you know. And so after prep, I went to Loyola right here on St. Charles, uptown New Orleans, to study marketing.
Okay.
So background in business, bachelor's of business admin with a focus on marketing. And from there, spent a little time in New York actually for that summer interning with the headquarters of National Urban League, so working under Mark Morial, who of course is our beloved former mayor of New Orleans, and then matriculated to law school at LSU back here in South Louisiana, specifically in Baton Rouge. From there, I had an itch to want to see other cities outside of what I experienced in New York. And so I actually took a job with Deloitte and Touche after taking the bar here in New Orleans in Los Angeles. So I lived in LA for a good bit. I say good bit, but honestly, it wasn't that long, but had an opportunity to work on some regulatory compliance consulting, specifically for companies in the energy space, one of the biggest utility companies in South California, and then also a financial institution, one of the largest financial institutions in our country. And so, as a result of doing some of that work, I said, you know what? I have this law degree. I've already passed the bar. I want to be a part of the solution in my own city. Let me go back to New Orleans. And so I was led to return back home and started practicing, did that full time for about 3 years. And so being back in the city really kind of opened my eyes to obviously the beauty of our city, as always, but then also highlighted some of the opportunities that we had for growth and improvement. And that led me to being interested in this role at GNO, wanting to be a part of the solution. And so transitioning from full-time practicing into this specific policy role.
Okay. So we go from Xavier Prep, which is right there on Magazine, right?
Yes.
Loyola's right there on St. Charles.
Uptown to uptown.
Then we go straight up the street to LSU.
Go to Baton Rouge.
Okay. So
Yeah.
having that Louisiana experience, and then you, like you said, you wanted to get out and go experience other places and work on other policies. Now having all that together, like when you're in that space of chief external affairs office, like how does that growing up in New Orleans, how that impacts the way you think about our community and the way we engage our community?
Great question. So I think it underscores every bit of my work. I think that having, first of all, the opportunity to grow up in New Orleans, to grow up very close in a tight knitted kind of, believing family. So really had the opportunity to have a breadth of experiences of being in our community, living in our community, growing up in our community, as many of us do. It gave me a front row seat to our genius, and how we are able to do a lot with a little, and how we are able and have always been the creators and at the forefront of innovation. And then couple that with my experiences being at Loyola, being in LA, being at LSU, et cetera, being able to merge the two and really understand when we are talking about economic development, how we can't have true economic development if we're not doing so in a way that brings everyone together, and it lifts the ceilings of everyone and the opportunities of everyone. And so I am happy to be a part of a firm, of a company that believes in that. I think when you look at our mission statement that was revised by our current president and CEO many years ago, he was very specific about wanting to make sure that our mission statement explicitly said that we were looking to have a thriving economy for everyone. And so that is at the backdrop of all of the work that we do, in the backdrop of all of the work that we do, and truly at the forefront of how we should be in our thinking about industries, and industry attraction, industry growth, but also what we're here to talk about today, new industries that come on board or existing industries that evolve. And so my experience in our community, my experience growing up in New Orleans, and the genius of our great city and our people that have crafted the genius and the culture of this great city informs everything that I do.
It's funny. I know we have a lot of great athletes that come out of this place. We have a lot of great artists that comes out of this place. A lot of great music as well. And I keep telling folks, I mean, we nurture that. Like at the moment we start nurturing new energy concepts and incubating really good ideas, we're going to get the same results that we got from from that nurturing music, nurturing art, and nurturing athletes as well. I definitely believe that. Now,
Mhm.
because of our unique culture and our history, and you said you've been outside of the state, so you've definitely seen how people function differently. When it comes to our culture and our history, how does that influence your personal values, though? Because I know, like, we learn different things when we go out into the world from corporate America, but there's certain things that from New Orleans that kind of stick with us, that kind of influences us. We kind of matriculate through that. Can you tell us a little bit about some of those influences from your perspective?
Yeah, it's interesting because having frequent conversations with friends who are from New Orleans who now live elsewhere and doing amazing things, we often talk about how New Orleanians are our biggest critics. We are our own biggest critics, I should say, and how, a lot of times, sometimes it takes the opportunity to be able to express your talent in other places to truly appreciate what New Orleans has done for you and how New Orleans has really shaped your development and how, your approach to things in the corporate space, right? Issues and problems and opportunities in the corporate space. We
Mm-hmm.
all can understand socially and personally, but it really does kind of give you the backdrop and the fuel to operate at a high level and with a lot of relentlessness,
Yeah.
with a lot of creative genius, even if you're not, kind of classified to be in a creative sector or creative industry.
Mm-hmm.
But we naturally think out of the box. We are resilient also, so we're not afraid of problems, issues, challenges. We also are akin to just being good people and good humans, and so that gives us a good foundation for relationship building at every level.
Yeah.
I would also beg to differ or beg the point that we are some of the most confident people on the planet.
Yeah.
A New Orleanian when you see one. You can be in Tokyo or you can be, in Mississippi up the street, but a New Orleanian, when they walk in the room, or a greater New Orleanian, respectfully, we represent the region and not just the city. But you know them when you see them, just because of how we carry ourselves, no matter where we are in the world. And I think that influences our ability to thrive no matter where we are.
Mm-hmm.
And I think to your point, I love that you brought that up because we do know many athletes that have come, great athletes that have come from our region. We know many musicians, of course, artists. That goes without saying. We produce the best, but I think also when we look at the corporate sector and when we look at who's leading in a variety of industries, many people, contrary to popular belief, have New Orleans roots. Either
Yeah.
they were raised in this area or New Orleans adjacent, New Orleans regional, super regional roots. When we look at even the breakdown from a Louisiana lens of what's happening at the federal level and what has happened over the past few years at the federal level, we punch above our weight in this state across the country federally. When
Yeah.
you look at for the past few years, who led infrastructure for this whole country was the former mayor of New Orleans, Mitch
Yeah.
Landrieu, put on
Yeah.
by the president. When we look at leadership in the House right now, the Speaker of the House is from Louisiana. Like the Speaker of the House,
Yeah.
the majority leader is from New Orleans in the House. Like that is massive power. When
Yeah.
we look at the Office of Budget and Management in the White House, Shalonda Young is from Zachary, Louisiana, only an hour north from where we are. And so that's just at the federal level, and I won't name everyone
Yeah.
because of time for time purposes, but we punch above our weight, and are able to get the job done no matter where you send us. Boardrooms, football fields, right? Concert stages,
Yeah.
um, the Capitol, wherever. So,
Well, we down here with the local team, so we on the ground. I know how good this ecosystem is because I spent a lot of time with it. So like, I feel real good about our local ecosystem. And I've had a chance to spend with our regional team. Our regional team is phenomenal as well as we kind of reach out to the University of Lafayette, and we're starting to reach out to North Louisiana a little bit more as well. And our federal team is super strong. Like you said, you can't name all the names. Um,
straight.
but one of the things I've started seeing was community is our superpower.
Yeah.
Right? Like regardless of if you're on that federal level or if you're at that local level, if you're from Louisiana, there's just something innate inside of you that you have an understanding of what it means, what community means, and what it means when it comes to supporting folks. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So
Absolutely.
sometimes, so I tell people, like, when we talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, most of the time I'm talking about all of South Louisiana, to be
Yeah.
completely honest. Because
Yeah.
as a state, I think we feel like we get left out of things. I think that the fact that South Louisiana is leading and that we're, in a lot of different spaces, we're at the top of the list, that's inclusion for us. Right? We're included
Yeah.
on some of the great stuff, on some of the good stuff now. So
Mm-hmm.
now, understanding that you come from that diverse background and represent so many people when you're in that position of chief external affairs, like, how does that influence your decision making and a lot of policies and things that you have to stand for?
So I think, as we think about my role in kind of leading us at the federal policy level or even at the state, I think, one of our um, kind of biggest opportunities in this space is to really promote the totality of our region, our super region, and even the totality of our state.
Hmm.
I think when, obviously I am a local and native New Orleanian, so I
Hmm.
understand the power of New Orleans proper, et cetera, and kind of what that looks and feels like. But the beauty of what I've experienced in being in this organization, being a part of this um, company and this overall mission of serving the totality of our region, which really yields itself to serving the state in some ways, is that there's a lot happening that we don't do. And when I say we as a collective,
Hmm.
um, that we're not always doing a great job at really promoting and understanding and showing to the world. There
Yeah.
is a lot of diversity, that diversity of talent, diversity of industries, diversity
Yeah.
of success that is happening in South Louisiana alone, let alone across the state. I
Hmm.
mean, there's a lot that's happening, and so I think in this role, really having the ability to grow appreciation for the value of the diversity of what's happening right here in our region. And I think sometimes, and we even talk about this internally, sometimes I think our parochial nature as a state, which influences how our parishes interact, kind of gets in the way of us promoting ourselves in a homogeneous way, right?
Hmm.
And so when we look at some other cities, and I'm not by way trying to compare, because you never know what's going on until you're on the grounds in those respective cities,
Hmm.
but larger cities have been able to win in certain areas because they deem their regions and super regions as one. There's
Yeah.
not as much parochialism that's saying, oh, well, you know, I'm I'm this, I'm not New Orleans, or oh, if I'm New Orleans, I'm saying, I mean, even saying you're from New Orleans and you are a West Banker is a problem, right? And
Can
so
be.
I
It
think
can be. It can. Yeah.
so I think eliminating some of those barriers to really kind of combine and aggregate the strengths across our South Louisiana region, across our super region, of this state, across, and then the state at large, could really influence a lot of just deeper opportunity. And so in my role, I think about that frequently as I'm at the legislature lobbying. I think about that when I'm on the Hill lobbying in DC, is wanting to make sure that I'm promoting and properly articulating the value and the needs of our region, our super region, and even at times our state.
Yeah. It's funny because you in the statement I was talking about a little bit earlier off campus. You're like, hey, OHUB is here so that no New Orleanian get left behind. So when you're talking about the diversity that we have here, really and truly, like you go in there with everything that's in the pot, like everything that we have here, all things that are important, be it our cultural economy, the whole nine. And so when you're
Mhm.
building these policies, really and truly, you're thinking about how is this going to impact everybody across the board, really and truly.
For sure, for sure. And how do we use our leverage as a company, as an organization, to help to influence that, to help to bring everyone along? And so I think OHUB is a wonderful example of that. So going back a little bit, and I know we probably will talk a little bit deeper about this specifically, and kind of how the OHUB GNO Inc. partnership came about. So I won't get into that, but I will get into my mind frame at the time, and why I thought having an OHUB in the space at that particular season and beyond was vitally important. And so when we were in well, first of all, you want me to just hop in now on that
Yeah,
story?
let's go ahead.
Because I think this is a good
I'm
segue.
right here. Yep.
Okay, I think this is a good segue. So I'll take a step back and talk about just kind of how the GNO Inc. OHUB alignment introduction happened, and then I'll get into why OHUB is so important in this season and beyond. And so fast forward, or I should say rewind back to September 2021.
Yeah.
Ida had just happened, or Ida was about to happen, unbeknownst to us. But we saw, I personally started hearing about Rodney Sampson, who is the founder of OHUB, and the great work that he had been doing across really the country, but particularly in Atlanta through OHUB, and how Rodney was instrumental kind of in shaping the ecosystem, the startup ecosystem in Atlanta, coupled with his ability and history of influencing federal policy in the space, and wanting to make sure that as federal policies and programs were being shaped, Black and brown people were not left behind. And so when I started hearing mumblings about him being interested in New Orleans and kind of having some things in motion, I then quickly realized we had a lot of mutual affiliations and mutual interests in those who we both love. So one was we shared a pastor, which I didn't even know, which is always a great sign. And then also there were a number of people in the community that he had already been connected to. Of course, he's a Tulane grad, that made it all the better. And so with that being said, I cold kind of LinkedIn him. We were just talking about LinkedIn. But I reached out to him very cold on LinkedIn, just DM'd him, which I'm not very active on LinkedIn. So that in and of itself is crazy. I don't think I've ever cold DM'd anyone on LinkedIn.
It was meant to be.
All right. And so introduced myself, told him who I was, and wanting to make sure that if he's interested in coming to the New Orleans region, that he knew that we were here to support his effort in any way that we could. And because that's at the heartbeat of what we do as economic developers. We seek to attract net new cash flows, net new resources, et cetera. And so we ended up having our intro discovery call in the middle of Hurricane Ida, September 2021. I was actually evacuated in a hotel room in Dallas. And I wanted to make sure that while a number of calls got rescheduled and pushed to the side because of the circumstances, this was the one that I said, you know what, we're not rescheduling this. Rodney is not in New Orleans at the time. And so we don't want to put off that impression that we can't navigate challenges respectively, right? And so, and also I was just that excited about the conversation that I did not want to push it further for any reason. And so we had that conversation, and kind of simultaneously, we were applying to the Build Back Better, the BBB challenge, which is the Build Back Better challenge that was put forth by the EDA at the time, or a little bit after that. And so after having that initial conversation, had no idea where that was going, but it was divine timing, and so recognized that what I wanted to make sure of as we were building out our application and our proposal, and ultimately our efforts in the future energy space for this application, that we were making sure that everyone was being served. That when we think about the energy industry, when we think about what was to come, I wanted to make sure that not only was our community being prepared to be a part of the workforce, right, which is vitally important, but I wanted to make sure that we were not only participants in the workforce, but that we were owners in the space.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to make sure that we were cultivating a pipeline of Black and brown owners and founders in the space of future energy. And so with OHUB's kind of immense experience in the startup ecosystem, but also, quite frankly, the in-depth knowledge that and experience that Rodney had already in the new energy space, and kind of connections that was already there to be able to understand what was even happening from a new energy perspective was just golden. And so that background, coupled with just true data and impact, was what made this successful. And Rodney's just kind of elite availability and kind of responsiveness and ability to collaborate and articulate how this needed to happen, for lack of a better word, was again just golden. And so OHUB, and as you said that, you know, that is exactly, you are exactly right. My vision for OHUB being in this space, and our organization's vision, our leadership's vision for OHUB being here, is to ensure that we are not leaving anyone behind as we are building, alongside of our industry partners, this future energy industry, right? As our industry is continuing to evolve and grow in this space, and even new areas of industry, of the energy industry, is coming online here in Louisiana. It was my personal
Yeah.
burden and opportunity, and I say burden in a way of like, it weighed heavy on my heart to want to make sure that we are putting in the proper infrastructure, right? And there's more to come. There's more to go. There's more opportunity to grow that infrastructure, but at least at the outset, I wanted to make sure that there was some element of infrastructure that was fostering that diverse pipeline, especially at the level of ownership,
Yeah.
in a meaningful way. And we knew OHUB would be able to do the job.
Yeah, man, definitely. And shout out to Shantiri as well. Um,
Yes, yes,
uh,
absolutely.
Co-founder. Yeah, man. And
Absolutely.
just
Santeria
to,
is fantastic.
yeah,
Fantastic.
the path that they have kind of set up for us to travel has been good, man. It's been like, again, like what makes New Orleans unique is that we get the opportunity to share these relationships, but also in sharing these relationships and in these connections. This is what I've learned in the ecosystem is that everybody has a little something to bring to the table. You know, it's
Yeah.
kind of like if you're fighting those storms, be it Katrina, be it Ida, like the fact that people in those moments of complete disarray, people come together to share to try to map themselves out of the challenge that they're in. And
Hmm.
I think that
Hmm.
that's what this, super excited you guys brought OHUB in. I'm super excited. Rodney decided to bring me onto the
Yeah.
project. Um, and this is, but this is par for the course for our community when it comes time for us to kind of figure out how do we get to that next level. And I can tell you, we have a lot of awesome Louisiana founders, Black and Brown founders, um, in this city that have been in the city. Now we're starting to find out across the whole state, really, that
Yeah.
have been showing up and have been showing out and they're putting on their best. We're learning a lot about them, and we get actually an opportunity. This is the coolest thing, and I'm gonna get right into our policy question. This is
Yeah.
that moment when we have a founder that's in the incubator that family went through Katrina, they had to leave, they with the Southern University
Mhm.
moved out of state, but now there's the opportunity for them to take what they're working on and bring it back to the state.
Yeah.
And that right there is that's kind of like that moment you live for, right? Like we
Yeah.
finally created something that those folks that had to leave have an
Yep.
opportunity to come back, right, and play an active
Right.
role in taking us to the next level. So that's pretty exciting too. So let's get into the policy stuff, man. So
Yeah.
we know that the H3 Future is making, besides OHUB, is making strides in other spaces, and you're starting to see a lot of activity up on the Hill, projects and things that are going on. So what policy initiatives can be implemented to like incentivize maybe private sector investment in the renewable energy um, projects in Louisiana? I mean, we know we got some funding from the federal level, but what are some of the ways you think we can inspire the private sector to invest a little bit more too?
So, excellent question, because I really think that, as you bifurcated federal and state policy opportunities, and needs, they really feed each other. right? And so I think we are in a place in time where we are seeing the fruits, are beginning to see the fruit of federal opportunity kind of meeting state need that will further state policy. And so to support the deepened, I should say, incentivization of private sector investment, we really have to make sure that both our federal and state policy levers continue to grow. And so when we look at the federal level, we've, as I've stated, that ball has already started, which is fantastic. I mean, already to date, a total of $1.47 billion in discretionary federal grant funding has already been awarded to Louisiana for future energy development.
Okay.
Already. And so when we start thinking about what are some of those specific vehicles that has been developed through, of course, we have the IIJA, the Infrastructure Investment Act, but then also you have the Inflation Reduction Act at the federal level, which is kind of commonly called the IRA. And the IRA really marks the most significant action that Congress has taken on clean energy in our country's history, period. And so the IRA has already created a few very highly competitive business incentives. So you have, the PTC, which is the production tax credit. You have the investment tax credit, the ITC, 45V, which is the clean hydrogen production credit, 45X, which is the advanced manufacturing production credit. And then, of course, 45Q, which really incentivizes CCS or carbon capture and storage projects. And so guidance is starting to be released for those incentives. And so, we are very much so participating in wanting to make sure that our industry leaders on the ground are aware of those credits, but then most importantly at this time, making sure that as rules are being promulgated, that we make sure that those rules are being promulgated in a way that does not exclude Louisiana or even kind of undercut the $1.47 billion that have already been invested in us. And so a lot of times up on the Hill, I should say, and I don't think this has ever been done with foul intention, is that if they're not hearing from us, if we're not being intentional about making sure that our needs and the impacts of their rules and how it's going to affect us is being heard, then that just gets promulgated and off with the winds. And so once those opportunities actually manifest, then we're left out. And something that we thought was once really, really good, and on its face seemed like it was going to be the saving grace or the ticket to help to help with incentivizing this investment, ends up being kind of counterproductive and unable to be utilized. So we're really heavily involved right now in the 45V promulgating process, which is the clean hydrogen production credit, because that's drafted. There's some, again, we believe is well intended, but in practice, there are some aspects of those rules that make that if promulgated in the way that is proposed, will make that credit completely unusable for clean hydrogen companies and end users right here in Louisiana. And so there is, of course, again, that's the federal aspect. But then at the state level, I think that there are some reform opportunities right here at the state level that can happen, that can continue to really foster a business environment that allows for the growth of future energy. And so when we're looking at permitting reform, there are opportunities for us as a state to streamline some of those permitting processes, but then also making sure that what's on the books today matches and or can facilitate future energy projects that may not have been in mind when we wrote the permitting processes decades ago, right? Mm-hmm. So permitting reform is huge. Transmission and interconnection, of course, policy as well. Procurement processes, which is where OHUB could come in, of course, making sure that we have the right procurement policies in place. Of course, one that allows for there to be the facilitation of ensuring that our local businesses are connected to the big projects that are coming online, both at the construction or at the design phase, construction phase, but then also more importantly, the longevity of the actual operational phases. And then workforce development, making sure that at the state level that we are collaborating across the board with ensuring that we have the appropriate training curriculum in place to be able to facilitate the workforce needs of our future energy pipeline.
Yeah. And I think that just real quickly, because when we hear about hydrogen, not a lot of us know about hydrogen. We're probably a
Yeah.
lot familiar with, what we do in the coastal region. I remember when I used to have to prepare my Christmas tree to be sent to the coast. So I have a little bit more concept around coastal
Hmm.
resilience, saving our shoreline. But this infrastructure already being in place and the pipelines, why are we such? And this is a little bit off because I know I sent you a question, but I want to kind of, this is something
Yeah.
I think is important for everybody. Why are we so set up to be major players in the hydrogen space? I just, that part is something I wanted to just kind of throw out.
No, that's a great question. So I think when we look at hydrogen specifically, we are already, and I say we as in Louisiana,
Yeah.
the state is already one of the largest hydrogen producers in the nation
Okay.
already. And so when we're thinking about that and kind of the current existing opportunity and also demand that exists and our ability to meet that, that is it's a given, it's foundational. But then also I think like many things when we think about the energy industry, just in general and at its inception,
Mhm.
we are who we are from a Louisiana perspective, and our economy across the state has been largely dependent on the energy industry. And
Okay.
so a lot of that is because of our geographical disposition.
Mhm.
And when we look at how our geography, the geography that we've been blessed with, of
Mhm.
course, the proximity to the Mississippi River, to the Gulf of Mexico, et cetera, our weather conditions, and some of the other more specific scientific layers of our geography and topography, I should say, here in Louisiana, just traditionally that has made way for the growth of the energy industry within the state. And so, because of that, when we're thinking about what's next, when we're thinking about hydrogen, when we're thinking about um, what that opportunity looks like. Listen, in 2020, we had already totaled about 2.8 million metric tons of hydrogen
Wow.
from a production perspective.
Right.
And so that means we already have the workforce for this, right? That means that we've already been doing this. We are ahead of the curve, and that we have I said skilled workforce already, but then with that comes the knowledge, the historical knowledge to be able to serve an industry while other states may have to come online and there's a lot more training that has to get done. We already have the transferable skills because of who we are as a state, because of who we've been as a state. And so there's a lot of opportunity there.
Most definitely, man. I think that was in an energy meeting this week, and they were just talking about the fact that anytime anything major, even the oil and gas, like a lot of those troops and a lot of those platforms were people from Louisiana being sent to other regions to work on their platforms to help
Mhm.
them get up to speed. And so we have really been supporting when it comes to fossil fuel drilling and all that stuff. We have really been supporting the country with skilled labor,
For
supporting the
sure.
world with skilled labor, really.
Absolutely.
So now, is
Absolutely.
there since we're super competitive based on what we naturally the position that we naturally hold? Are there some other ways that you feel like we could be more competitive in attracting renewable energy companies to our region?
Yeah, I think so. I think, you know, chiefly, as we've already stated, wanting to make sure that as the federal agencies, respectfully are developing and promulgating rules to the IRA incentives, right?
Hmm.
If you talk to many um, renewable energy leaders, especially in the on the business side of things, they are counting on the ability to utilize and leverage the IRA incentives.
Yes.
And so if we don't ensure that the incentives rules are being promulgated in a way that makes those incentives usable for our state, then that already gives us, unfortunately, a very unfair advantage. Excuse me, a very unfair disadvantage. Right. So continuing to be very actively involved in that promulgation process is key. And so that is one of the things that we can do as a state at all levels to make sure that we are ensuring that we will be competitive and will remain competitive to attract companies. I think also, as we're thinking about attraction and kind of what makes sense for us, is not only advancing policies at the federal and state level that align with an attractive business environment, but also expanding our workforce programs. Look, we've talked about the fact that from a workforce perspective, we have been kind of on the cusp of energy development and production for decades. I want to say centuries, really. And so I think that as new technologies are coming on board, making sure that our workforce training providers and our college and technical community colleges and also higher ed institutions are staying up to speed with that, right? While there are a lot of transferable skills in the space of energy, that, like you said, we've undoubtedly already been supplying workforce and talent to energy opportunities and developments across the globe. When we're talking about these technologies, however, there are nuances that may come online. There are opportunities for furthering of education. And so we want to make sure that we continue to have a leadership in the workforce space in energy. And so making sure that our colleges, our community colleges are up to speed on that, as well as our higher ed institutions have the support that they need and have the industry perspective in collaboration with the development of those programs. That is one thing that is just critically important from a workforce perspective. And that's one thing that we pride ourselves on here at GNO Inc., specifically from the workforce lens and the work that we're doing, is that we are very keen on making sure that we are advancing industry-informed workforce development programming. Because if we just stay in the world of academia, which has its own purpose and it deserves honor and appreciation, of course, in its own respect. But if we just stay in the lane in world of academia without involving industry to inform what those programs should look like or what that curriculum should look like, then you have a gap, right? We have an educated pool of talent that still requires a lot of training, right, when they come on board. And so industry, it works out better for everyone, for the school, for students and graduates, and for industry itself, when industry can collaborate at the outset for those programs. And so I think that is another major opportunity for us as a state to really make sure that we are doing and marketing at a high level for that. And as we think about workforce specifically, I would be remiss not to talk about some of the workforce efforts that we're doing with respect to our H to the Future grant and ultimately Louisiana Future Energy. There are very defined efforts that's happening with LCTCS, which is the Louisiana Community College and Technical System that houses all of our community colleges. And so there are training programs there that are being developed alongside of industry and kind of fueled also to ensure that those programs are reaching everyone in partnership with the Urban League of Louisiana as a very strong partner, as well as the Louisiana Parole Project, to make sure that reentrants are being trained respectfully as well within the future energy, renewable energy space. I think in addition to that, one thing that I'm also very excited about is the opportunity for our HBCUs to develop specific certifications and specializations in the renewable energy space that will allow our HBCU students to have the opportunity and the training necessary to, again, not just participate from a blue collar perspective, which is respected and needed for sure, but wanting to make sure that we have options and that we are being intentionally thought about across the spectrum. And so I'm very excited about our HBCUs and their ability to develop specific certifications and specializations at the policy level, at the business level, at the legal level, to make sure that there are those trajectory that there is a trajectory paved out for them to enter into the C-suite of these companies. So you have LCTCS, the National Urban League, Louisiana Parole Project operating in the traditional workforce sense. But then you also have, and kind of looking at those technical jobs, then you have the HBCUs looking at the more kind of professional services opportunities in the space, more of the white collar space opportunities and kind of C-suite trajectory opportunities. And then you have OHUB that's focusing on the ownership aspect and the entrepreneurship aspect of all of this work. So that's the breadth of what we are really excited about when we think about the future of renewable energy opportunities here in the state.
What's been really neat about this, the connection that we're in it for the, working with the entrepreneurial side, but our four-year universities have brought us some really interesting things, Mike, right? Like, so we just got off a call with Southeastern. Southeastern offered to help any of our founders with machine learning and any type of AI they want to add to it. Got off the phone with University of Lafayette. They want to add, hey, anything that you got solar projects, our guys are willing to give you office hours to talk about your solar projects. And shout out to the two-year colleges, because I think that what they're literally doing is they're formulating programs that can take people to a $70,000-$80,000 a year job, with 2 years, with saving time, 2
years. 2 years. Matter of fact, as we were just kind of alluding to some of the hydrogen success already in the production impact in the state. Listen, over the past 5 years, and these numbers are as of earlier this year, there were already 35 clean energy projects within the state, across the state, which represented $45.6 billion of CapEx investment, approximately 23,000 jobs. And to your point, the average salary for those jobs, $79K.
Yeah.
Right. And so there is a real opportunity to, go to our 2-year colleges, which is why, listen, respect every element and aspect of higher education.
Yes.
At every term. But when you start thinking about trying to get our community and others just reacclimated and connected to the future of what's happening here in Louisiana, specifically in the energy space, many may not have 4 years or even the financial backing to do a 4-year program. Or they may not want to immediately become an entrepreneur. And so when we're looking at the breadth of jobs and the kind of mass aspect of the jobs that will be offered, our community colleges, community and technical colleges are playing an enormous role. And those degrees and certifications are leading to high-paying jobs.
And just like you came back, I came back. I had a chance to talk to Matt Wolf over at your spot. I know Matt came back. He was talking to Nikki. Nikki came back. I believe that we have a population, I call them the silent Louisianans. We have a population that if there's opportunity, if we start recruiting those folks who had to leave, they're coming back home.
For sure.
And they're going back home to make a difference. It's a purpose there, right?
Absolutely.
And so I do believe not only are we building a pipeline, but we also have the wherewithal to recruit our folks back home as well to come and contribute to that workforce. Now, when it comes to at the local level, from a city perspective, and I know we talked a lot about what what we could do at the federal level. What are some of the things that you think at the local and at the municipal level that we could do to encourage more activity in the renewable energy space or innovation?
Yeah. So, I think a lot of what we talked about at the federal and state level honestly can be replicated even at the local level. When we're talking about things like permitting reform, there are local permits also that are needed for certain projects. And so making sure that process is efficient
Yeah.
Making sure that that process is responsive, making sure that
Yeah.
that process has been kind of vetted and juxtaposed against what is now happening with future energy and renewable energy. So, like that same approach that we're taking at the state level is needed at the local level as well. And so, I think also looking at transmission, and obviously the transmission work, a lot of that's at the state level and at the federal level for sure. But there are still local companies that will have the ability to participate in those kind of state and federal opportunities that are going to be vital and are currently vital to ensuring that we have the business environment where future energy can grow and scale. And so I think making sure that even as we're talking about local, making sure and of course workforce remains a big opportunity, but at the local level, making sure that our high schools are up to speed on what's happening in this space. Folks are saying all the time that workforce development no longer starts after you graduate high school.
Hmm.
Workforce development is even starting now in middle school. And so making sure that our local high schools, our local middle schools are informed and have the support that they need from industry to be able to introduce the appropriate skills that will be needed to foster this growth in the industry and to be able to kind of weather and navigate and succeed in navigating the innovation that is taking place in our energy industry.
And then and we're talking about what can be done better, but I want to still give a shout out for the progress that has been taking place
Mhm.
too. The Feet
Absolutely.
Greenway, beautiful
Yeah,
spaces happen. I think the groundworks crew is doing some really good
strong works. Absolutely.
projects. We love seeing their stuff, and so it's people out there who are absolutely doing great stuff. I think to kind of bring it together, it's like right now we have founders, 7 founders who would love to be working somewhere within inside of our municipal framework to help to utilize their projects to kind of help our situations. But that means that when we tap on those doors, is like at least give us that listening ear.
Yep.
Yep. And it's not, all of our solutions are not the perfect solution. I think the only thing that we're always asking for is just give us that listening ear. And I think that we probably can learn a lot from each other,
Mhm.
especially those founders, because they soak up every experience.
Yeah. No, you're right. Being open. Being
Just be
open.
open. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
So, what advocacy efforts are needed to ensure that Louisiana remains at the forefront? Now that we are surging in this clean energy transition, like what are some of the ways that we can do to solidify it? And we know it's like when you run, especially when you're running with a lead, right? Like how do
Yep.
you keep that lead? You just watch the Olympics. Um, you know what I'm saying? Yeah, I watched what's that? McLaughlin, Sydney. If she
Yeah.
took off on that second leg, it was all over, right? By the time they
Every
got to
time.
the anchor, how do we run with that lead? Don't lose time and continue to advance forward.
So I think continued education is very important. And I know we've been talking about education in the space of actually becoming educated to participate, work, own, et cetera, within the space. But what I'm talking specifically about here is advocacy. I
Okay.
think that it is really incumbent upon our legislators, upon our local leaders, as we were just alluding to, and on us to ensure that we are at doing the educating and the proper kind of advocacy and education of those leaders so that they can have the background to understand one, what's happening in the space, what's already happening in the space, and then two, what's in the pipeline and how this will truly impact the economy of our region, of our state, because those are the true decision makers, right? When we're
Right.
thinking about all the things that we've just listed, incentives, permitting, et cetera, those things cannot happen without the favor and the vote and the championing of our elected officials. We have to continue to do that. And so I think that as we have as we continue to educate our delegation of elected leaders at all levels,
Mhm.
that will position our state to win. Just yesterday, we had an opportunity to educate one of our congressional leaders about 45V and how that, while on its face, the the credit and kind of the policy efforts behind it seem amazing, and we were all highly anticipating them. But when we get into the draft rules, this does not work for us. And so we had the opportunity to lay out what those reasons were, and how we need him to advocate for us as a state to make sure that we are positioned to win in this area. And so just advocating in that way, and endorsing education of our leaders. But that is two-faced. It is not a single sword. We also equally have the responsibility to educate our community and our constituents for multiple reasons. Of course, to understand the opportunities that are at bay here, and how they can be a part of it, but also to help to mitigate some opposition at times. I think that while there is a very clear opportunity to advance environmental stewardship and responsibility, I think that it is also important, especially with clean energy projects that are doing so in a manner that is clean, that is advancing reducing emissions, that is advancing kind of streamlining, and again, just overall decarbonization. We can't turn away everyone, right? And so it's important for us to just be properly educated on that, so that we are making an educated, for lack of just keep saying the word educated, but we are making an educated decision and choice when we are kind of navigating how we support or oppose something. And so that is one thing that I think, as a state, as a region, as a local community, that we have to do to make sure that all the things that we're talking about today just continue to be realities in our state and continue to grow.
I think it's what we toss this around sometimes. I love just when we go back and forth, just in the ecosystem, what needs to be done, because it's one of those things that everybody knows something needs to be done, but we're all trying to figure out what little piece do we have. And for us, the distinct crossroad is the ecotourism, man. It's that space where we're it's our economy, our climate resilience, and all that's kind of wrapped together, right? There is, how can I be a good steward as a citizen? But then what is it that I can do that because we are all ambassadors to the city. How many times you've been stopped? What's the best place for me to get this? What's the best place for me to get that? It happens all the time. So being able to, be good stewards, but also share the community and share the things that we're doing to turn the tide when it comes to resilience and renewable energy and different things like that. Just because we're all ambassadors.
Right. Absolutely. We are.
So we're at pretty much the closing part. I'm trying to figure out, Nikki, if you have any questions, just let me know. I think we might be good. I'm going to use my last 3 minutes to, we're good? Perfect. Okay. So now, as I close out, we've talked about all these different experiences that you have in being a native New Orleanian. As we move forward with our policies, with renewable energy, all this, because it's a new space for us. What's the kind of like the message you gave to everybody in March of last year when we was kicking off? Knowing what you know now, what's the message for us as we move forward? Give us a little something from a leadership perspective and some things that you think that we should be focused on and listening for.
Well, I think, really to culminate all the things that we've advanced in our discussion today, and that is, one, to speak directly to OHUB, continue to do what you're doing, continue to show up. You guys have helped to elevate the work that we're doing across all spectrums, because with you in the room and others, of course, we are ensuring that our community's interests are being raised and advocated for. You are everywhere, which is fantastic. And I say that in the very best way. It is a pleasure and the joy. I mean, I hear around the office all the time. Well, we had OHUB there, we had that, and I mean, it is just a sigh of relief every time because you're doing the work and you're close to the needs, and you're doing so in a genuine, authentic, and meaningful and impactful way. And so to OHUB, to you, to Rodney and Shanteria, to Nikki, to the whole team, keep doing the work, hang in there, and because again, you are here so that New Orleanians are not left behind in this evolution of what we're seeing in our energy industry. And so, thank you for that. I think to us as a whole, and it kind of piggybacks on what my last response was. And as much as it is our responsibility to in ours, I say that from a leadership perspective, and from the business side, to ensure that our communities are educated, ensure that the word is getting out about what is happening. I say to everyone else, also take the initiative to ensure that you are connected to the work, to become as educated as possible on what is happening, on the programs that are happening, on the opportunities and regulations that are being shifted to ensure that this happens in a way that is meaningful, impactful, and responsible. And so the charge is to really to continue the good work, OHUB, and then to us as leaders and constituents in the space, to continue to educate ourselves and others about what is happening, because the future energy is no longer what is going to happen. In a lot of respects, is what's already here.
Mm-hmm.
And so, how do we carry again the burden and the opportunity to ensure that we are all a part of this evolution? And that's the charge.
We appreciate that, man. I think that even our founders, the ones who came through cohort 1, they always come back to volunteer and work. Yeah. So we are, you know what I'm saying? Like we I think there's a whole that we get that this moment, all of us have to, all hands on deck. Black, brown founders, allies, you name it, all hands on deck in order for us to become a strong community and push our new energy opportunity forward, especially since we're already, primed and in the space and ready to move forward in advance. So, Jasmine, thank you so much for being on the show with us. We really do appreciate you. Thank you for that vote of confidence. And we look to continue to do this work, man. We're excited about it.
Absolutely. Well, again, thank you for having me. And I want to thank, I've already said it a million times, but I have to say it again. I want to thank Rodney and Shanteria for the work that they're doing nationally, and also right here within our state. And then Leroy and Nikki for being the on the ground movers and shakers, doing the work and making sure that the impact is being had. And I also want to thank our energy team, the GNO Inc. energy team, of course, under the leadership of Lacey McManus, but also Salim on our team, who has kind of taken the torch from me and has done a fantastic job in leading the inclusive energy efforts from the Louisiana Future Energy perspective, and Leo John Arnett, who is our internal policy lead on all of our future energy policy efforts. So thank you for having me. Always love to be in good company. And this is, in fact, great company. So thank you so much.
Good deal, man. We appreciate you guys, man. We'll be back next month to talk a little bit about Fund 17.
Awesome.
Nick, that bad boy just shut down. You still there? You got sound? You on mute?